All right, if you don't have questions for next week, we'll get those in just a moment. Sam is going to make more copies, and when he comes back, we'll let you know about that. If you don't have questions for today, we don't have extras, so don't worry about it. You don't need, we're going to make it without those. All right, this is the last week in our trimester, and next week will be Mark 1. So your questions will reflect that. If you don't already have a copy of that, you'll get those covering Mark 1. Next week, we're going through the Gospel of Mark next. We're studying each of the Gospels independent. In this survey, study Matthew, and then we'll study Mark, Luke, and John, and look at the synoptics, not together, but independently, and make comparisons as they need to be. All right, here's where we are. We are in the book of Matthew. We're finishing up. This is our outline from Baxter that we have considered each time, and we're in the last two sections. We're coming out of the crucifixion into the resurrection, and coming out of 27 in a few moments and into chapter 28. We're in the Passion Week as we've outlined it here, and we'll get to that timeline and that schedule in just a moment. Let's review our chapters, where we've been and where we're going. Chapter 1 of Matthew. This is our last time to review these. Chapter 1 was? Very good. Chapter 2. Good, yeah, good to the wise men, master of the shore. Very good. Chapter 3.
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist and the baptism of Jesus. Chapter 4. Very good. Chapter 5 through is Sermon on the Mount. Chapters 8 and 9 go together, dealing with two themes. Miracles and discipleship. Chapter 10. Apostles chosen and sent out on the limited commission. Raise your hand if you need questions for next week. Sam is back with those. If you need questions for next week, keep it up until Sam gets to you. Chapter 11. Very good. Chapter 12.
Pharisees find fault with Jesus.
Very good. Chapter 13. Parables. 14. John the Baptist beheading. 15. Very good. Chapter 16. Peter's confession. 17. Very good. Chapter 18. Relationships, parallel in principle with Romans 12. No, that's what that's worth. Chapter 19. Very good. And 20. Parable of the workers of the vineyard and the mothers of Zebedee's sons. 21 starts where we are now, what we call this period of time. Passion Week. And in chapter 21 we have triumphal entry, chapter 22. Parable of the wedding feast and exchange of questions, 23.
Rebuke of the Pharisees.
All right, yeah, that rebuke of the Pharisees, that scathing rebuke of the Pharisees. Chapter 24, destruction of Jerusalem, 25 last week. Judgment in 26, trail and rest and trial. Got into the trials of Jesus last time, and that's our last run through Matthew, because we're getting into Mark next time. This is the last week of the life of Christ. It begins with the triumphal entry in Matthew chapter 21, the cleansing of the temple on Monday, Tuesday, and perhaps Wednesday. There's some question about Wednesday. Some suggest there's no record of Wednesday, and some suggest Luke 21 suggests more teaching and just the overflow of all that went on what we think of as being on Tuesday. But that scathing rebuke, the announcement of the destruction of Jerusalem, his last public discourse on Tuesday, maybe spilling over into Wednesday. Thursday is the observance of the Passover and the farewell to the disciples and his being in the Garden of Gethsemane. Last week we got into the arrest and his trial, and we're still on Friday right here. This is where we are on Passion Week and his crucifixion. Then he was in the tomb on Saturday, and we'll get to Sunday in chapter 28 when he was raised from the dead. Question number 1, chapter 27, what's it about?
Crucifixion.
Crucifixion, chapter 28. Question, is that 2? Yes. Deals with the resurrection. So we have the crucifixion, chapter 27, the resurrection in chapter 28. We'll come back to that outline there in just a moment. Here's chapter 27. A lot of ground to cover here. For those who are visiting with us, we are in a survey, 5-year survey, so we're going at a pretty fast pace. to get through the entire Bible in 5 years. So that's why we're pushing through chapters 27 and 28. A lot of ground covered here. But anyway, we're dealing with the crucifixion in chapter 27. That's the main event of chapter 27. But we have the trial. Judas hangs himself, the mockery of Jesus, the crucifixion, his burial, and then the guards set the tomb. I'm more interested not just in the crucifixion, but his trials. We're trying to keep up with his trials as we go along. All right. Let's back up just for a moment, if I can find my mouse, and let's talk a little about the setting of these trials. There were two major trials, as we mentioned last time, of 3 hearings each. There was a Jewish trial, and then there was a Roman trial. There needed to be a Roman trial because the Jews were not allowed to carry out execution without the Roman approval. And consequently then, the Jews had to make their determination that indeed they needed to refer him on to the Romans that he might be crucified. So this is a mockery of a trial. It's an illegal trial. Every one of the hearings are illegal. There is no justice at all. This is a hurried thing that starts about midnight, and by daylight they're already gone through 6 hearings. Can you imagine someone being arrested last night about midnight, and by this time in the morning they've already been executed? That's how quick this went. That I want you to see in just a moment. So we're ready for the 3rd hearing, is where we're ready for. And so let's review a little bit what we've seen in the, all right, here's the 1st hearing. All of this is not recorded in Matthew, but I just want to get the gist so you can get the idea of the mockery of the trial. John records this for us. Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not record this. Does not say nothing about it. They rushed him first before Annas and questioned him about his doctrine. And Jesus raised the question, if I've done evil, then what evidence do you have of that? Then they rushed him off to Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. That's what we studied last time. And they brought false testimony about the temple. Caiaphas asked what response he has. Jesus was silent. Caiaphas asked if he was the Son of God. He said yes. He said, well, now he's guilty of blasphemy. The Jews said he's worthy of death, and they blindfolded him and spat upon him and beat him, and they struck him. And we don't know the exact time, but what the timetable that I'm putting up here is based upon by the time of the crucifixion and the estimation of some students of how long it would have taken to assemble the Sanhedrin, how long it would have taken to go from there to Pilate's Praetorium, how long it would take to go back, and that time back and forth. We don't know the exact time, but I'm just trying to give you how quick this took place. So if he was arrested around midnight and went to the first trial somewhere between 12 and 1 o'clock, and somewhere between 2 to 4 o'clock they have the Sanhedrin assembled. That's not the full assembly of the Sanhedrin. Now we're ready at verse 1, chapter 27, for the full Sanhedrin to come together. This is the 3rd hearing. Make sense? This is the 3rd hearing in the first trial. This is the Jewish trial and the end of the Jewish trial. And all Matthew tells us is found in verse 1. So in verse 1, Matthew tells us, Mark mentions verse 1, the rest of our information is found in Luke. You want to make a marginal note, or maybe your Bible has the marginal note. So verse 1 said, in the morning the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And then verse 2 says, the guy took him off the top. Well, Matthew doesn't tell us the details of that, so let's get the details. From Luke's account of this, here's what we get. They ask, are you the Christ? And Jesus answers, if I tell you, you wouldn't believe me. And if I asked you, you wouldn't answer, let me go. And then he made the claim he was the Son of God. And then the question was, are you the Son of God? And Jesus says, I am. And they said, we don't need any further witness. And so they can't carry out the sentence, and they're ready to go off to the Romans. That's why verse 1 doesn't say much about that. Are you the Son of God? Yes, I am. Well, that's blasphemy. Let's rush you off and you got to be executed. So this is about 5 to 6 in the morning. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, perhaps before daylight, they've already gone through the Jewish trial, 3 hearings in the Jewish trial. Now, verse 2 talks about him carrying him off to Pilate now. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But all verse 2 says is now they rushed him off to Pilate. They take him off to Pilate because they're ready now for the Roman trial. 3 hearings involved there. We making sense? All right. Let's go back, and we're coming back to that 4th hearing in just a moment, but let's catch up in Matthew chapter 27. And get Matthew chapter 27, if I can find it right here. All right, we'll come back beginning at verse 11. That's that 2nd hearing of the of the first hearing of the Roman trial. Got you? You got that? All right. Now let's pick up at verse 3. Let's take Matthew 27 in sequence. The scene stops at the trial to tell us something else about the disciples. And so we have Judas hangs himself in 3 to 10. So let's see what happens in 3 to 10. What has Judas done? What do we know about Judas before we read this? We saw in chapter 26.
He's the one that actually give Jesus over. He said the one that I kiss will be the one that you're looking for.
Yes, and they paid him 30 pieces of silver as the price of a slave, basically. And we talked about last time, and he betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver. If you don't have answers to question number 10, here's a good place to find one. If you don't catch it, we'll mention it before we get through with 3 to 10. The text says that Judas, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought the 30 pieces of silver back. And what did he say? I have sinned in betraying innocent blood. And their reaction was, so that's your problem. That's a paraphrase, obviously, but what is that to us? You see to. I mean, it's a big deal. We don't care. So he threw the money down in the party, and then the chief priests, what did they do with the money? Bought a field, potter's field, the text says. And, but why did they have to do that? Why didn't they take it and put it in the treasury?
He said it was unlawful.
Yeah, because it is not lawful to put into the treasury, because this is the price of blood. There's two things I see so far. Very practical, and answering questions in, practical lessons. Remorse does not equal repentance. People can be remorseful for their sin. They can regret they did something. They can shed buckets of tears over the sin they've been involved in. That doesn't necessarily involve repentance. There is no true repentance here. He doesn't come back to the Lord and tell the Lord that he's sorrowful for that and beg for forgiveness. Because what does he do? He goes out and hates himself. He doesn't find a correction for his sin. So being remorseful doesn't equal repentance always. Now, does repentance involve remorse? Certainly so. But remorse within itself doesn't involve it. The second thing is, I learned from this is, in a practical sense, is hypocrisy. Here were the very ones that put Jesus through the mockery of an illegal trial, putting to death an innocent man, but we sure don't want to take this blood, this money that's been used to shed blood, and put it in the treasury because we want to do things lawful and right. Yeah, right, you do. You don't care a thing about that at all. Now, there is a textual question here at verse 8 through 10, and that is whether this quotation is from Jeremiah. This fulfilled Jeremiah the prophet. It says, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him that is priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and they gave it for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. That's not found in Jeremiah. So the critics have had a great deal to say about that, and that's actually a closer quotation from Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. And so you might make a marginal note if you have a marginal reference column in, probably a footnote to Zechariah chapter 11. There may be an allusion to Jeremiah 32 of Jeremiah buying a field. That's altogether possible that that's the case. Comfort says, and this is a quotation from one commentator, that Zechariah's words do not mention the purchase of a field, but Jeremiah's do. Jeremiah 32. In fact, it is Jeremiah who speaks of innocent blood, Jeremiah 19, and the buying of the potter's field, Jeremiah 19, and it was Jeremiah who purchased a potter's field, Jeremiah 32. Thus, Jeremiah received the credit because he was the more prominent prophet. Well, does that explain all of that? I'm not sure. But that's a reasonable explanation as to why Jeremiah is given the credit, though the quotation seems to be from Zechariah. Jeremiah was a major prophet, a more well-known prophet, a major prophet, in not only in size of the book, but in impact. And because he had made references to those, he gets credit, though the quotation seems to be from Zechariah chapter 11. Not a big issue, but that is one the critics latch a hold on. Now, for board information, Acts 1 talks about him hanging himself. Then he fell headlong, and his entrails burst out. He burst in the middle, and his entrails fell out. So it was a very violent death of Judas. Let's talk about the rest of the trial beginning in verse 11. So let's get back to the trial now. This trial is the first. I want to keep up with where we are, so let's find right here. This is the first of the Roman trial. He goes before Pilate. And that's the first one of those. Then he's going to go before Herod Antipas, and then back before Pilate again. We're going to get all of number 1 and number 3 of the Roman trial here in Matthew chapter 27. So let's go to this before Pilate, the governor. And this is, again, about 5 to 6 in the morning. They rush him off, and this has all got to take place before 9 a.m. because we know at the time of the crucifixion that we're going to get to in a moment. So let's look at verses 11 to 14. Verse 15 starts another trial, another hearing, that is. So in 11 to 14, what happens? You tell me. This will be an answer to question number 5 about questions that are asked.
The first question they asked him, are you the king of the Jews?
And his response was,
It is as you say.
it is as you say, you claim to be king of the Jews. Then Pilate's question and Jesus' answers are different questions. He was not king of the Jews in a materialistic sense, but he was king of the Jews. And so he answered correctly. Nonetheless, the next question was, verse 13. Yeah. You hear what these Jews are saying? That what they said is not recorded here. Some of that's recorded elsewhere in the Synoptics. But you hear what they're saying about you? And Jesus answered nothing. So let's combine Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's account of this hearing, and let's get the picture of what goes on here. So some of this is not recorded here because you're going to say, well, I didn't see that. Well, not here, but you're going to see it in the parallel accounts. Pilate said, what's the accusation? And the answer was, if he were not an evildoer, we would have brought him to you. You stop and think about that. You call a policeman over and say, you need to arrest this man. Well, on what charge? I wouldn't have told you to arrest him if he hadn't done something wrong, so go ahead and arrest him. I mean, that's how much sense that makes. Well, Pilate said, you judge according to your law, and they accused him of perverting the nation, forbidding to pay tax, and saying he's king. So this is where Matthew picks up. Are you king of the Jews? Jesus said, yes. And then he said, do you hear what they're saying? Like the charges of perverting the nation and saying you're king and forbidding to pay. Do you hear all of that? And Jesus did answer. And Pilate raised the question about what is truth. In John 18, when Jesus said that about the word being truth, and then Pilate said, I find no fault in him, and he's ready to send him off to Herod Antipas. That's what a mockery of a trial. Now, you think we're going through this in a hurry? We're just giving you the summary. This trial went about this quick. This is the shambles of a trial. You rush in here. What's the charge? Well, he says he's king of the Jews. Are you king of the Jews then? Well, y'all see to that. And do you claim to be the Son of God? I am the Son of God. Well, then let's go away with him. He's guilty of blasphemy. It's about that quick. There's nothing methodical about it at all. All right? Now, let's pick up in verse, then they rush him off to Herod Antipas. This is not told to us in Matthew. And he doesn't do much. He just listens to, he asked a few questions. Jesus didn't answer. They said they made some accusations. And then they treated him with contempt and sends him back to Pilate. So let's pick up at verse 15 now. This is where this is the last of the hearings. So are you following me? Two major trials, Jewish and Roman. We've already been through the 3 Jewish hearings. We're now ready for the 3rd of the Roman. This is the last. And this is by 6 or 6:30 in the morning, approximately. If you want to take it an hour one way or the other, that doesn't matter. But we've got to get through and have him on the cross by 9 o'clock. Make sense? So he was arrested around midnight, and this is his 3rd hearing in 2 major trials. Let's see what happens here. Beginning at verse 15. And this is going to carry us now through verse 26. So let's work through this as quickly as we can. What happens now beginning at verse 15?
At the Feast of the Governor, they always custom releasing one of the prayer to him. And he asked if it would be Jesus was promised, and they said, Mark.
All right. There was the custom of releasing a prisoner. There was one named Barabbas, not mentioned here. Actually says he was guilty of murder. He was a murderer. And so here was a man who was guilty of a violent crime. And who do you want to release him? And they say, they're going to say a little bit later, it's Barabbas. I want you to notice, so here's a question. We have it, verse 19. When he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife said, have nothing to do with this just man, referring to Jesus. For I've suffered many things today in a dream because of him. So what's that about? The truth of the matter is, I don't know. That's all we know about that, is what she said. And is that an accurate record? Well, it's an accurate record of what she said. But what caused the dream? There is no evidence that that was a miraculous dream, or that God caused her to have a dream. And so several have speculated in several directions that would give some explanation of that. One of which is that because they woke Pilate up in early hours in the morning, or abruptly came in and get him to go for this hearing, that she very well could have fallen back asleep and had a dream about all the things that are going on. We've all done that. Something on your mind, and then you have a dream about that. And so maybe some tragedy you just heard about, and then you have dreams about that. And so it may be that she had a dream, and so she suffered in this dream because of him, and she thinks perhaps that's God talking to her. I don't know. She said, have nothing to do with this just man. He's a just man, and I've suffered in a dream many things because of him. Now, in verse 21, when he said, who do I want me to release? And they said, Barabbas. Now, verse 22 talks about another question.
What shall I do with Jesus?
What shall I do with Jesus? And they said, let him be crucified. And the governor said, what evil has he done? And they said, even more, let him be crucified. There began to be a tumult, an uprising, according to verse 24. And then what did Pilate do? What does that mean?
He wasn't going to have anything to do with it. He was turning it over to somebody else.
Yeah, acts as if he's innocent. He could have released Jesus. That would have been the innocent thing to do. But he symbolically washes his hands like, I'm done, and this is y'all's doing. If you want to crucify him, y'all do that. I've got nothing to do with it. And so here you have the claim of innocence and pretending to be something that indeed he's not. So you see dishonesty, the lack of courage. You have something you want to give to answer question number 10, practical things. I see a lack of courage. Here's a man who knows what's right, but he won't take the stand in the direction of right, and he lacks courage. And so that's y'all's doings. And if y'all want to do that, go ahead. Acts, yeah, exactly. Because of that lack of an action, he gave approval to the crucifixion of Jesus. Good point. All right. There's more to that hearing. Jesus brings him out and says, behold the man, and Pilate says he finds no fault in him, and the Jews said, we have a law that you're going to die, and so there's more to that hearing. And finally, he scourged him. What does that suggest again? Notice that in verse 26, they scourged Jesus. What's a scourging?
Terrible whip, if they said bones or stones or something.
Yes. Take it, just whip him. Some descriptions are given of a man being tied around a post or a tree so that his back is stretched, and then take basically a whip that has pieces of bone or stone in them so that when they pull, it cuts. And basically they take and they whip him, and they are literally flaying his back open. And so they scourge him and they whip him, and then they lead him away to be crucified. All right. Now, let's go back to our outline and see if we can put this together and make some sense of all of this. So we've gone through the trial. And at this point, we've gone through 2 trials and 3 hearings within about a 6 and 6.5 hour period. Make sense? I mean, this is you ever talk about rush to judgment? This is rush to judgment. If you ever get a chance to read some material by Roy Cogdell on the trial of Jesus, he approached it from the standpoint of an attorney. He was, some of you remember Roy Cogdell. He was licensed to practice law before the Supreme Court. And And he did a legal analysis of the trial of Jesus. And it was on the basis of that sermon that he was admitted to the bar of the Supreme Court. But anyway, let's talk about the mockery of Jesus. What happens in 27 to 31? Let's go quickly hit this. Someone tell me in one, two, or two sentences, what happens in this mockery? Before they crucify him,
The soldiers strip him and then place the crown of thorns on him. And make just put the scarlet robe on him. Make a mockery of him.
yeah, he claims to be very good. The claims to be king of the Jews will pretend like he's king. So they put a crown of thorns on his head and they smote him and they cry, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They're making fun of him, ridiculing him. And then beginning at verse 32, let's talk about the crucifixion. 32 to 56, the crucifixion now. In the crucifixion, let's get 2 or 3 points here. Simon of Cyrene bore the cross for him. They led him off to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Mark and Luke refer to that as Calvary, same place. Several questions as to why it's called the place of the skull. Some think the rock there looked like a skull. Others said, the tradition said, the skull of Adam was supposed to be buried there. But that was what it was known as, the place of the skull. They gave him sour wine to drink. That's a reference to Psalm 69 and verse 21. Now, verse 35, if you've been keeping up with the 10 of 10, remember that? So if you're visiting with us, we don't have the other 9. We don't have time to go back to the other 9, but I can get that list for you. 10 of 10 references where the statement is made that it might be fulfilled. This is number 10 of 10. This is the end of our list. 10 of 10 right here in verse 35. In other words, there are 10 times where that statement is made. There's more than that where the Bible is, the Old Testament prophecy was fulfilled. For example, back over here where we talked about the prophecy of Jeremiah and Zechariah. But it wasn't stated there that it might be fulfilled. But 10 times that phrase is used that it might be fulfilled. This is number 10 of 10. We're marking those. All right. And that is the quotation in verse 35 from Psalm 22. They divided his garments. And then they put a plaque over him saying he was king of the Jews. Not recorded here, but in John, the request was made that Pilate change that. What was the discussion about?
He said the king of the Jews. They wanted to put it-
Yeah, not that he's king of the Jews, but he said. Verse 38, 39, and 40 talks about some of the mockery. There were 2 robbers, one on the left, one on the other side. There were others that came by wagging their heads. Verse 40, for what it's worth to you, is an interesting point that he was asked to do something contrary to the will of God. If he's the Son of God, let him bring himself down from the cross. Could he have done that? Yes. But it would have been contrary to the will of God. That's why he did not do all that he had the power to do. More mockery. I'm interested now beginning at verse 45, that about the 6th hour until the 9th hour there was darkness on the face of the land. As we harmonize the accounts, let's get kind of a time clock. He was put on the cross about 9 a.m. Jewish time starts at 6, so about the 3rd hour would be 9 o'clock, and that's when he was put on the cross. And he stayed there till about 3 p.m. From 9 to 12, he made 3 of the 7 statements. 4 of those statements were made from about 12 to 3 p.m. So now we have at verse 45, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, for 3 hours, there was darkness over the face of the land. Matthew records that one of the statements he made was, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is simply meaning,
My God, why have you forsaken me?
my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Verse 50 now. He finally yielded up his spirit, which means he died. And I want us to list 2 or 3 things now that came as a result of his death. And let's see what they are. What's the first? Verse 51. Veil of the temple was ripped from top to bottom. What does that tell you? The way into the most holy place, that is heaven itself, because of the parallel in the book of Hebrews. The way to the most holy place is now made known. It was through Christ. That's how we enter into the most holy place. our way into heaven is made known through Christ. You think of the thick veil between the temple, it just right into, from top to bottom, completely, at the death of Christ. A second thing happens. Verse 52. Graves were open, which suggests that through Christ, that's how people are raised from the dead. There is a hope of resurrection through Christ. All right, there's something else is said in the context. The centurion stood by, and his conclusion was, this indeed is the Son of God. I know that's a hurried look at the crucifixion, but we don't want to leave him in the grave, and we're going to get to the resurrection here in just a second. Now, the burial is in 57 through 61, and what do we know about his burial? Who buries him? Joseph of Arimathea. Later is identified as a secret disciple, not here. So don't go looking in Matthew for that reference. You're not going to find it here. But he seems to be a secret disciple. He's been secretly following Jesus, but now that he's dead, he put him in a new tomb that was hewn out of rock, which suggests this new tomb, there is no way to escape. It's not a cave you put him in, but it's a tomb that's hewn out of rock. There's no back door that he can escape out of, and they claim to be raised from the dead. That's always been interesting to me. They put him in a new tomb. Now, 62 to 66, we're going to make a brief comment about that. What happens in 62 to 66? Why they set the guards? You're right. Yeah, one of the questions, I don't remember which one, if what the Pharisees remember that the disciples had forgotten. That's it. They remember he said he would rise from the dead, and when some of the disciples in John 20 come to the tomb, they'd forgotten that. Remember that? But the enemies remember he claimed he'd be raised from the dead, and so lest he make this claim, let's set a guard, and let's protect that. All right, let's go to chapter 28 now. In chapter 28, we have the resurrection. Verse 1. Verse 1 says, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, the Sabbath and the first day of the week are two different days. You know that. But quite often you hear people talk about Sunday as the Christian Sabbath. No, it isn't. The first day of the week and the Sabbath are two different days. They're distinct here in this text. So as the Sabbath began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to the tomb. And what happened now when they come to the tomb? Verses 1 through 8. Get to the tomb. Find out the tomb is empty. Look at verse 6. The angel who rolled back the stone said, he is not here, for he is risen. Come see the place where he lay. Point in Acts 2. When Peter is proving the resurrection of Christ, he argues from an empty tomb. Make sense? This is the first argument for the resurrection of Christ that's ever been made in history. Was the angel announcing, come see the place where he lay. The tomb is empty. The question is, how did it get to be empty? There's only a few explanations could be given. He either fainted and came to and pushed his way out. The disciples stole it, the enemy stole it, or he actually was raised from the dead. There's not much else you can say about how the tomb became empty. We won't pursue all of that argument at this juncture. Now in verse 9 and 10, what happens? He appears. Mary Magdalene. As they went to tell the disciples, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice, and they fell down and worshiped him. They recognized him as being the Lord. Not at first, not recorded here, but they did recognize him after some discussion. And then he told them to go, tell the brethren to go to Galilee. Now what happens in 11 to 15? I'm trying to get to the Great Commission. 11 to 15.
They brought the soldiers to say that he was stolen while they slept, and said this securely became governor's years.
Absolutely. Can you imagine the reaction when Apollo hears about this? That I thought we set a guard. I thought they put him in a new tomb, and I thought they set a guard. I thought I authorized soldiers to guard and protect. But when an angel rolls the stone back, you There's no amount of guards could keep that from happening. Can you imagine the reaction? We got to get some story together so they bribe the soldiers to say the disciples came and stole it. That's not possible. That's not possible because it was guarded by soldiers, number one. And if the disciples had no motive for stealing the body of Jesus. John 20 suggests they were not expecting the resurrection, though they had been told of that. The enemies had no motive for stealing the body of Jesus. Evidence for them would be in the tomb. Now let's quickly get 16 through 20. We cannot do this full justice, but this is the Great Commission. After Jesus has been raised from the dead, some days later now, he issues the Great Commission. And so beginning at verse 18, what's the first thing he establishes? He has all authority, both in heaven and on earth, has been given unto him. Jesus says he has all authority. That's the power to execute commands, to command and exact obedience. All authority. Then, based upon that authority, he gives them the commission to do what? Go therefore and make disciples. Some translation will say teach all nations. Make disciples of all nations. That didn't make them disciples, he makes learners of them. So it's the idea of teaching them. And then those that are taught, what are you going to do? Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That, I'm convinced, is talking about being baptized into a union with, a relationship with the Father, with the Son, and with the Holy Spirit. And then, verse 20, we'll make a point as we wrap this up. Verse 20 says, what do you do now?
Teach them or instruct them in God's ways.
Teaching and instructing. 2 or 3 things we learn practically here. Question 10. Number 1 is, Christianity is a teaching religion. It's not something you feel. It's not something you experience. It's a teaching religion. Meaning, you're taught. Verse 19. And then when you obey, then what else happens? You are taught some more. Make sense? Christianity involves a teaching religion. Quite often we want to teach people, then we want to baptize them, and then we leave them to sink or swim. And this happened years and years ago, more than it does in the present day. Rather than go off to a foreign country and baptize 100 people, and then go back the next year and baptize 100 people, and then go back the next year and baptize 100 people, and then when you go and visit the church, there don't be 50 people in the church. Well, not all those hundreds were baptized. Well, perhaps they were taught and then baptized, but they were not taught to observe all the things that the Lord commanded. Make sense? Verse 20, here's another point we need to learn. The teaching is more than teaching them what the Lord commanded them. We should teach them to observe them. Make sense? Teaching them to observe all things which I commanded. It's one thing to teach them, here's what the Lord said do, but we may need to teach them how to observe and how to obey them. Here's how you fulfill this. Here's how you execute those commands. Interesting point. All right. I know that was a hurried look at that. There's a lot of ground to cover.